Hello, and welcome to the very first inaugural episode of the Heroes Veritas podcast. This podcast is going to be a little bit of a takeaway for me. I historically have done podcasts with a co-host. I am more conversationalist. I enjoy the feedback of another person. However, I'm going to try to do this one solo, with the exception being episodes where I do conduct interviews, which is also in itself a new step for me. I don't typically or historically have not done interviews. So if you're joining me, hopefully you understand what we are, what we're trying to accomplish. However, I am going to cover that today, as well as the meaning behind Heroes Veritas. But I wanted to take a moment to explain who I am and what has generated, in my mind, the need for this podcast. So my name is Tim Bass. I'm the owner of a fitness apparel company, which failed. I want to be very clear on that. And I should say it's stalled. It's not necessarily failed. I don't put the energy into it. I do work IT. I am divorced. I spent time in the Marine Corps in 06 and 07. I'm a certified personal trainer. I've done martial arts for most of my life. And I grew up pretty much as poor as you can be. I've stood in church lines to get food. I've slept under bridges, in cars. And now I make six figures the traditional way, with a day job, 9 to 5, on top of my other, ventures. So that's a little bit about me. That's kind of where I drive a lot, or where I pull a lot of my life experiences from. So there's a lot of good, which I like to focus on, but there's also a lot of struggle and a lot of bad. And that's what I feel qualifies me to have these conversations. And luckily for me, and I'll get into why this applies, I had two very strong male figures in my life, despite the struggles. I had a grandfather who was a Marine, who had a very crazy life, which I'll probably explain more or get into that story later on in future episodes. And my father, who took his guidance from my grandfather. And while I do have a very differing opinion on the approach, the ideals and the ideology behind what they tried to accomplish and how they saw life is very much a big reason why I see the need to bring this podcast to be. So Heroes Veritas, what does it mean? Heroes Veritas is Latin. Throughout this podcast, I'm going to draw on a lot of ancient cultures, a lot of tribal knowledge, a lot of old stories and epics, to create anecdotally the opportunity to explain men as a general rule. However, the name is Latin. Heroes is, as it sounds, it's heroes. However, this is going to be the plural possessive of heroes. So that means heroes, if you would. And it's basically saying that we all own a certain responsibility as heroes. And so that is the audience that I'm seeking to inspire, is the hero within all of us. And Veritas. Veritas is something that has been, I think, sensationalized and hyperbolated to the nth degree, but it does mean truth. It means the ultimate truth in Latin. And so in this conversation, I'm looking to develop and discuss the ins and outs of the truth of a hero, what it means to be a hero, what it takes to be a hero, and call upon the listeners, subscribers, and audience to really challenge themselves to seek their truth and seek what it means to be a hero within their tribe, within their community. So that's the name. My intent, and I'm going to read it because I liked the way I articulated it on my board over here, so give me a moment, but the intent is to facilitate the reclamation of man's capacity for greatness, to restore the social and tactical tools required for men to proudly reach for the heavens, provide for their tribes, and build a brotherhood of strong, capable, and moral men. That is the purpose of this podcast. I am targeting men. I do believe that our society is lacking in moral, strong, and capable men. It is a gap that I seek to remedy, not only through this podcast, but as well as the Heroes Veritas Brotherhood, which is another supplemental effort that I will be working on and communicating more information out through various social media. So what got me here? What led me here? To be honest, probably the hardest winter season of my life for the last 3 years. I went through, or close to 4 years now, I went through a divorce of a 10-year relationship, 5 years married. That one was very eye-opening because it was honestly where I started to feel confined to the social construct of man, the do's and don'ts, the finger wagging of you're not allowed to do X, you're not allowed to feel Y, and having garnered my freedom by choosing to walk away from that very difficult choice I made, but choosing to walk away from that, I identified that I was checking boxes that belonged to somebody else, not myself. So in that freedom, I reclaimed a part of myself. And, through the next year and a half, I had my tribe support me and hold me up both emotionally, mentally, and physically. They gave me a place to stay when I didn't have one. They were a soundboard for my ideas, a soundboard for my reclamation of my freedom. And then I had a mental breakdown. I was doing too much for too long. I was running the apparel business. I was doing my 9 to 5, which was actually more of a 10-hour job to 15-hour day job. On top of working on the business, I had another podcast called Relentless Sovereignty that I was working. I was doing personal training in the mornings and at night, so before and after work. I was also working on my own attempt at getting on stage for a bodybuilding competition. I've had several failed attempts at that. And it finally it hit a head, and my physiological response to it was a full physical shutdown. I had panic attacks. I couldn't see. I was shaky. I'd end up in the fetal position on the floor of my kitchen. And so I tell you this because we all go through struggles. I'm not seeking sympathy. That was my winter season. And so I was actually diagnosed with bipolar disorder, something that I'm learning to manage and accepting as part of my identity. There was some ego and some pride in that, but I did come out of that, in my opinion, on top. I do own that. I like to tell my friends that I am a bipolar badass. And I have succeeded in my life, unmedicated, untreated, and undiagnosed with bipolar disorder. My medical team, and I say team because there's a couple people that have to be a part of a diagnosis like that, believe that I've been suffering from bipolar disorder from as early as 10 years old. And so the fact that I've been as successful as I have, I've gone through numerous traumas, which I won't get into on this episode, maybe in the future, to me is a sign of my strength and my capacity for growth, learning and delivering on my promises to myself, because even in spite of all that stuff, I've still been able to succeed as where I have. Now, last year, 2020 hits, we have quarantine, we have COVID, we have, in my opinion, a government overstep, serious government overstep. And also I realized that with the stagnation and or failure, however you want to look at it, of True Rain, I actually was grieving the loss of that dream. And it put me in a deep depression. And I went from 190 to 200 pounds all the way up to 230, 240 pounds, which is not too crazy for me. I've been up as high as 300 pounds when I first started my fitness journey. But it is an indicator for me of my mental and physical state. And so having realized that I was grieving the loss of a dream changed how it was affecting me. And I was able to compartmentalize it and manage it a little bit better and finally set it down and walk away from it. But because of COVID, I said that so strongly, and I apologize if that was loud in your ear, but because of COVID, there were a lot of conversations that had to have both socially and politically And I was very vocal on Instagram. I was extremely vocal, both political and scientifically speaking from a virology perspective, research that I was doing on my own, and things just weren't adding up. And it led to, now you have to also understand, I've never been political on my Instagram. My Instagram has primarily historically been for fitness and motivating in that arena. So for me to switch gears and start being political and start being openly critical of social issues was obviously a little bit of a shock for the people that followed me. So I adjusted, and it led to some really good conversations. Last year, I also lost my mentor to COVID. He had set me on this path to be a coach, and his death was very difficult for me to take. It obviously makes you challenge your thinking when you're being critical of something. Maybe it is worse than you think, so on and so forth. But I've since come to terms with my own mind of right or wrong or how I feel about it. I know how he would feel about it. And so it led to a week off of social media and just internalizing and compartmentalizing all these conversations and realizing that where my coaching program that I originally started and went to go for was targeting a larger audience of both men and women with no real niche or background. I really felt that I see a greater issue here, and that's the men that we look to are far cries from the men that we once held in high esteem. Warriors, explorers, great thinkers, courageous individuals, both on the battlefield and not. These were the people we look to. We still look to that archetype today in our movies, in our literature, but we no longer harness that construct or that concept in our own persons. We no longer try to emulate that ideal archetype. We instead, to be honest, I've seen a gross devaluation and perversion of those archetypes. Things like toxic masculinity, things like fragile masculinity, ego-driven, misogynistic. While these all may exist in some form or another, depending on your social viewpoints, I do believe that it is a perversion of what masculinity truly is, and that's where I see the need for this podcast, and that's what I'm seeking to do, is to reclaim that true, pure definition of masculinity, which is amoral, meaning that it has no fixed morality to it, as people want to do by putting their own values onto it. They want to say it's, toxic, or they want to say it's evil, or it's, it leads to the bad in the world. And like nature, masculinity is amoral. It is, or it isn't. It does not have its own innate relevance to morality, right or wrong, more than the value that it's been given by the person who owns the masculinity. And so I feel like I'm getting a little off track here. I'm starting to get on my soapbox a little bit about masculinity, but ultimately, to digress, I'm looking to build a group of men that truly want to be strong, courageous, masterful, and honorable, to lead their communities in the way that our ancestors and our epic ideological archetypes led their societies of their time and their tribes. And so we're gonna explore ancient texts. We're gonna explore modern day philosophers such as Jack Donovan, Ryan Michler, even motivational speakers such as Tony Robbins or Gary John Bishop. And there's so many names. Those are just recently what I've been reading. And we're going to explore those, and we're gonna put them against a backdrop of a logical soundboarding system. I'm going to provide my feedback on where those fall in a social obligatory capacity. And then we're going to give tactical tools for men to guide other men or men to guide themselves. And I wrote a quote up on my board, and that quote was, mastering ourselves to master the world. And that's ultimately what it is. We're gonna look internally. We're gonna work internally to then create a powerful external impact. So that's the purpose of the Heroes Veritas podcast. That's what led me down this path. 2020 was a shit show, to be honest, and the lack of masculinity became evidently apparent with me. Men lacked courage. They were spineless. They wanted to bully and argue and threaten violence that they can't back up, because they lack the prerequisites to threaten violence. So we're going to address those things. We're going to address ego. But one thing that I'm going to finish out the why we got to this point, or how we got to this point, is 2020. I've seen a lot as people going, I can't wait till 2021. And I'm recording this in January of 2021. What most people fail to realize is that time is a construct of man. And therefore the universe gives affords it no mercy or accordance based on man's need for time to change. Times are, period. They are neither good nor evil. They are innate. They will continue to march forward whether we like it or not. And unless we change something, nothing changes. There's a quote that I hear a lot from people that I admire that says, nothing changes if nothing changes. Sean Whalen uses this a lot. And I believe he also says radical change requires radical change. And it seems duplicitous, and it seems like hyperbole, and it can at sometimes seem almost trite, but if you literally let those words sink into your soul, and you sit with them a while, and you understand that it is the core of how men manifest their own destiny, you will realize how powerful those statements are. Nothing changes if nothing changes means literally you have to change it. Something must change. And the only thing you can change is yourself. The only thing you can control is yourself. If you want a radically positive change to your life, an exponential growth point, you have to do something radically exponential. You can't expect radical change from minute effort, right? Laws of physics, equal and opposite reaction. Objects move with the same force that they were applied to in a vacuum. So if you don't put force, you're not going to get force. So digressing back into future state, what we're trying to achieve. I already have the first 10 episodes determined. These first 10 are core foundational concepts, and I'm going to address these concepts individually per podcast. These concepts are an attempt to give you a crash course in my capacity for taking a hold of a situation or life and improving it. I'm a science nerd. I love it. I may not understand the mathematics of it, but I absolutely love science. Quantum mechanics, specifically theoretical quantum mechanics, states that for every decision you make, a universe is created. But furthermore, every decision you make, a universe is created not only for the decision you made, but for every decision that you could have made but chose not to make. And so for food for thought, as we close out this episode, I like to tell people, if quantum mechanics suggests that realities exist as a result and direct correlation to our ability to make a decision, then you should make the decision that this is the reality that everything works out. This is the reality that you are exactly the person that you choose to be. This is the reality where you stand up and you write the chapter that you've always wanted to write in your life book. Now, you can't control other people's chapters. You can't control how they write you, but you can control how you write you. You can control this reality by purely deciding that this is the one where you win. This is the reality where you succeed. This is the reality where you are and will become the very person that you have wanted to be your entire life. Just decide. And with that, I'm going to close out my first inaugural episode of the Heroes Veritas project. I will be bringing more content in the future, as well as trying to get some interviews with people that I look up to. And then obviously as we grow and as our audience grows, I'm going to look to the audience to help me pick those interviews as well. I hope you all have a great day. I hope you all live strong. I hope you live courageously. I hope you live with mastery, and I hope you live with honor. And I hope that you're able to provide for your tribe in any way that that means for you.